Chapter 8. I watched Catherine's cab vanish around the corner. She never turned or waved or spoke. She would wake tomorrow with vague memories, just a night out with the girls. I would like to have thought she was safe, out of it, but I knew better. The air smelled thickly of rain. The street lights glistened off the sidewalk. The air was almost too thick to breathe. St. Louis in the summer. Peachy. "Shall we go?" Jean-Claude asked. He stood, white shirt gleaming in the dark. If the humidity bothered him, it didn't show. Aubrey stood in the shadows near the door. The only light on him was the crimson neon of the club sign. He grinned at me, face painted red, body lost in the shadows. "It's a little too contrived, Aubrey," I said. His grin wavered. "What do you mean?" "You look like a B-movie Dracula." He flowed down the steps with that easy perfection that only the really old ones have. The streetlights showed his face tight, hands balled into fists. Jean-Claude stepped in front of him and spoke low, voice a soothing whisper. Aubrey turned away with a jerky shrug and began to glide up the street. Jean-Claude turned to me. "If you continue to taunt him, there will come a point from which I cannot bring him back, and you will die." "I thought your job was to keep me alive for this Nikolaos." He frowned. "It is, but I would not die to defend you. Do you understand that?" "I do now." "Good. Shall we go?" He gestured down the sidewalk, in the direction Aubrey had gone. "We're going to walk?" "It is not far." He held his hand out to me. I stared at it and shook my head. "It is necessary, Anita. I would not ask it otherwise." "How is it necessary?" "This night must remain a secret from the police, Anita. Hold my hand, play the besotted human with her vampire lover. It will explain the blood on your blouse. It will explain where we are going and why." His hand hung there, pale and slender. There was no tremor to the fingers, no movement, as if he could stand there offering me his hand forever, and maybe he could. I took his hand. His long fingers curved over the back of my hand. We began walking, his hand very still in mine. I could feel the pulse in my hand against his skin. His pulse began to speed up to match mine. I could feel his blood flow like a second heart. "Have you fed tonight?" My voice sounded soft. "Can you not tell?" "I can never tell with you." I saw him smile out of the corner of my eye. "I am flattered." "You never answered my question." "No," he said. "No, you haven't answered me, or no, you haven't fed?" He turned his head to me. As we walked, sweat gleamed on his upper lip. "What do you think, ma petite?" His voice was the softest of whispers. I jerked my hand, tried to get away, even though I knew it was silly and knew it wouldn't work. His hand convulsed around mine, squeezed until I gasped. He wasn't even trying hard. "Do not struggle against me, Anita." His tongue slid across his upper lip. "Struggling is exciting." "Why didn't you feed earlier?" "I was ordered not to." "Why?" He didn't answer me. Rain began to patter down, light and cool. "Why?" I repeated. "I don't know." His voice was nearly lost in the soft fall of rain. If it had been anyone else, I would have said he was afraid. The hotel was tall and thin and made of real brick. The sign out front glowed blue and said vacancy. There was no other sign, nothing to tell you what the place was called or even what it was, just vacancy. Rain glistened in Jean-Claude's hair like black diamonds. My top was sticking to my body. The blood had begun to wash away. Cold water was just the thing for a fresh blood stain. A police car eased around the corner. I tensed. Jean-Claude jerked me against him. I put my palm against his chest to keep our bodies from touching. His heart thudded under my hand. The police car was going very slowly. A spotlight began to search the shadows. They swept the district regularly. It was bad for tourism if the tourists got wasted by our biggest attractions. Jean-Claude grabbed my chin and turned me to look at him. I tried to pull away, but his fingers dug into my chin. "Don't fight me. I won't look into your eyes. My word that I will not try to bespell you. For this night you may look into my eyes with safety. I swear it." He glanced at the police car, still moving towards us. "If the police are brought into this, I cannot promise what will happen to your friend." I forced myself to relax in his arms, letting my body ease against his. My heartbeat sounded loud, as if I had been running. Then I realized it wasn't my heart I was hearing. Jean-Claude's pulse was throbbing through my body. I could hear it, feel it, almost squeeze it in my hand. I stared up at his face. His eyes were the darkest blue I had ever seen, perfect as a midnight sky. They were dark and alive, but there was no sense of drowning, no pull. They were just eyes. His face leaned towards me. He whispered, "I swear." He was going to kiss me. I didn't want him to, but I didn't want the police to stop and question us. I didn't want to explain the bloodstains, the torn blouse. His lips hesitated over my mouth. His heartbeat was loud in my head. His pulse was racing, and my breathing was ragged with his need. His lips were silk, his tongue a kiss, his tongue a quick wetness. I tried to pull back and found his hand at the back of my neck, pressing my mouth against his. The police spotlight swept over us. I relaxed against Jean-Claude, letting him kiss me. Our mouths pressed together. My tongue found the smooth hardness of fangs. I pulled away, and he let me. He pressed my face against his chest, one arm like steel against my back, pressing me against him. He was trembling, and it wasn't from the rain. His breathing was ragged, his heart jumping under his skin against my cheek. The slick roughness of his burn scar touched my face. His hunger poured over me in a violent wave, like heat. He had been sheltering me from it until now. Jean-Claude! I didn't try to keep the fear out of my voice. Hush! A shudder ran through his body. His breath escaped in a loud sigh. He released me so abruptly I stumbled. He walked away from me to lean against a parked car. He raised his face up to the rain. I could still feel his heartbeat. I had never been so aware of my own pulse, the blood flowing through my veins. I hugged myself, shivering in the hot rain. The police car had vanished into the straight-lit darkness. After perhaps 5 minutes, Jean-Claude stood. I could no longer feel his heartbeat. My own pulse was slow and regular. Whatever had happened was over. He walked past me and called over his shoulder, "Come, Nicolaus awaits us inside." I followed him through the door. He did not try to take my hand. In fact, he stayed out of reach, and I trailed after him through a small square lobby. A human man was sitting behind his front desk. He glanced up from the magazine he was reading. His eyes flicked to Jean-Claude and back to me. He leered at me. I glared back. He shrugged and turned back to his magazine. Jean-Claude moved swiftly up the stairs, not waiting for me. He didn't even look back. Maybe he could hear me walking behind him, or maybe he didn't care if I followed. I guess we weren't pretending to be lovers anymore. Fancy that. I would have almost said the master vampire didn't trust himself around me. There was a long hallway with doors on either side. Jean-Claude was halfway through one of the doors. I walked towards it. I refused to hurry. They could damn well wait. The room had a bed, a nightstand with a lamp, and 3 vampires. Aubrey, Jean-Claude, and a strange female vampire. Aubrey was standing in the far corner, near the window. He was smiling at me. Jean-Claude stood near the door. The female vampire reclined on the bed. She looked like a vampire should. Long, straight black hair fell around her shoulders. Her dress was full-skirted in black. She wore high black boots with 3-inch heels. "Look into my eyes," she said. I glanced at her before I could stop myself, then stared down on the floor. She laughed, and it had the same quality of touch that Jean-Claude's did, a sound that you could feel with your hands. "Close the door, Aubrey," she said. Her R's were thick with some accent I couldn't place. Aubrey brushed past me and closed the door. He stayed in back of me, where I couldn't see him. I moved to stand with my back to the only empty wall so I could see all of them, for what good it would do me. "Afraid?" Aubrey asked. "Still bleeding?" I asked. He crossed his arms over the bloodstain on his shirt. "We shall see who is bleeding come dawn." "Aubrey, don't be childish." The vampire in the bed stood. Her heels clicked against the bare floor. She stalked around me, and I fought an urge to turn and keep her in sight. She laughed again, as if she knew. "You wish me to guarantee your friend's safety?" she asked. She had gone back to sink gracefully onto the bed. The bare, dingy room seemed somehow worse with her sitting there in her $200 leather boots. "No," I said. "That is what you asked, Anita," Jean-Claude said. "I said I wanted guarantees from Aubrey's master." "You are speaking with my master, girl." "No, I am not." The room was suddenly very still. I could hear something scrambling inside the wall. I had to look up to make sure the vampires were still in the room. They were all utterly still, like statues, no sense of movement or breathing or life. They were all so damn old, but none of them were old enough to be Nicolaus. "I am Nicolaus," the female said, her voice coaxing and breathing through the room. I wanted to believe her, but I didn't. "No," I said, "you're not Aubrey's master." I risked a glance into her eyes. They were black and widened in surprise when I looked at them. "You are very old and very good, but you are not old enough or strong enough to be Aubrey's master." Jean-Claude said, "I told you she would see through it." "Silence! The game is over, Teresa. She knows it. Only because you have told her. Tell them how you knew, Anita." I shrugged. "She feels wrong. She just isn't old enough. There is more of a sense of power from Aubrey than from her. That isn't right." "Do you still insist on speaking with our master?" the woman asked. "I still want guarantees on my friend's safety." I glanced through the room at each of them, and I am getting tired of stupid little games. Aubrey was suddenly moving towards me. The world slowed. There was no time for fear. I tried to back away, knowing there was nowhere to go. Jean-Claude rushed him, hands reaching. He wouldn't make it in time. Aubrey's hand came out of nowhere and caught me in the shoulder. The blow knocked all the air from my body and sent me flying backwards. My back slammed into the wall. My head hit a moment later, hard. The world went gray. I slid down the wall. I couldn't breathe. Tiny white shapes danced over the grayness. The world began to go black. I slid to the floor. I didn't hurt. Nothing hurt. I struggled to breathe until my chest burned, and the darkness took everything away.